Well, hey, good afternoon, folks. This is Bill Costanzo, Livestock Guardian Dog Program Specialist with AgriLife Extension. Today we have our Facebook Live Q&A. This is going to be session number 42. It's hard to believe that we've been doing these for almost 4 years. I do want to thank our sponsors, Lone Star Tracking and Spot On Fence. Please help support these vendors that support this program for you. If you have any follow-up questions, for those of you that had already posted comments, please feel free to post those in the comment section, and I'll try to get to those as well. We've got a pretty full schedule today. We had quite a few producer questions come in, and some of them are rather lengthy explanations. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started today. So our first question is from our one of my favorite followers, Sarah Smith. So hopefully you're logging on here this morning, Sarah, or this afternoon. Sarah's question came up involving a pup that she put in the picture to me, who's almost 3 years old now and about 100 pounds. She says the girls were due for shots, and she was going to take them both last Friday. But Luna is usually excited to go in the car and jumps right in, but she absolutely wouldn't get loaded this time. She thinks it has to do with the fact that it's a new vehicle and the dog was unfamiliar with it. She says, I've had her in both the car and a truck in the past, and it hasn't been an issue. She said she did manage to get Pie loaded to the vet, and she ended up giving up on Luna, and so she's going to have to reschedule her. She said this also brings up another challenge, as Pie freaks out a bit when Luna's removed and will jump the fence to get to her, she says, hot wire and all. Any tips on getting Luna to load easily, preferably without just picking her up by the shoulder, because Sarah has a shoulder that's bad. She says, I plan on corralling Pie into the feeding area with a bone for distraction and hoping for the best when she has to take Luna to the vet the next time. So always love your issues that you have going on at your place, Sarah. And I appreciate you reaching out each time. So yes, I do think that the different vehicle could be the issue with Luna, and that's why she was afraid to get in for you. What I've found is that livestock guardian dogs definitely love the status quo. And any time that something changes in their environment, they're very wary of that. Whether it's a new vehicle to get into, it's new livestock, a new tractor on the property, even a new jump gate design on a feeding station. So you have to go through some retraining with the dogs each time when there's something like this that comes up. And so one thing that you could do, Sarah, or maybe this is a tip for another producer as well, if you have a small livestock trailer, or even like one of those 2-horse trailers, put your livestock guardian dog in there, and 1 or 2 sheep or goats as well. One, it makes them a lot easier to load because they're going with some animals, and it also makes them not as fearful of the travel as well, because they're not separated from their animals. I know that hauling a guard dog to the vet can definitely be a challenge, and it can be challenging for us a lot of times too, which is why we give our guard dog pups a truck ride once a week, kind of as part of their bonding and training process. So that would be my recommendation for Luna. Sarah had another question. She said she's finally going to try a dangle stick with Pie to curb her chasing with the poultry. She just wanted to ask a few tips concerning dangling one dog, and if they were likely to wrestle, if the dangle would affect them getting into the feeding area, or one of them, would get tangled up while they're wrestling around or something like that. So, the dangle stick shouldn't affect them playing. It may definitely hinder her, though, from getting into an actual feeding station. It could get caught on the bottom of it, or it might bang on the, if you've got like a, I think you said that you have a tube gate. So yeah, if that chain, clangs on the gate, they might get fearful of that. So you will have to work with her, getting into the feeding station. The other thing is that I did have a producer send me a new design from the one that y'all have seen, like in our fact sheets and stuff like that. It's more of a triangle shape, and at least based on the videos that the producer sent me, it doesn't turn. And so, if their feet are here, that dangle stick doesn't turn and go down the middle between their legs. It stays across their chest, and I really like it, and I need to update our fact sheet for that. But, if you'd like to try that triangle design, Sarah, I think you have my email. Drop me a line, and I can send you a picture of it. But it does seem to work a lot better than the wooden one. So our next question, and this one is kind of a long one, and so this is from another longtime follower on our Facebook page. This is from Casimir K, and we've been kind of going back and forth with some issues with Lepto and her dogs, or at least that's what they believe is the problem with her guard dogs. She says she needs to know some information about leptospirosis. She hadn't realized it had reached Fort Bend County, and perhaps more appropriate vaccinations for different areas of the state. She says that 2/3 of her dogs now have been treated, but the vet isn't sure, if that's definitely what they have or not. She says that her dogs are in more of an urban area, she says that they absolutely have nothing to do with rats. She's got another dog, and he's in fine health, a little overweight, but otherwise in good condition. She says research indicates that she's done that it's a waterborne, highly transmissible bacterium. All the dogs have been exposed at this point. She wanted to know, if her livestock and her birds and goats are also eligible to participate in contracting the disease. And her dogs are lethargic, they're anorexic, they have diarrhea, weight loss, some have a slight fever. Says the capillary blood return on the gums is good, and let's see here. So thanks Casimir K for reaching out to us. I do want to preface before I get into this information that I am not a vet, and so I did reach out to our local vet, and the information that I'm going to go over here is what they sent me. So I would encourage you that if you think you have some sort of an infectious disease with your guard dogs, to reach out to your vet as soon as possible, and also to make sure that you vaccinate your dogs annually. While I know that there's a lot of the vaccines, may actually last longer than a year, guard dogs are exposed to a lot of different diseases and bacteria and things like that out in the environment all the time. And so, if you get a batch of vaccine for some reason that doesn't work well, your dog could be completely unprotected for a period of time. So, vaccines are not very expensive. They're very effective at stopping diseases in dogs and livestock. And so I would encourage you to make sure that your guard dogs and your livestock are vaccinated for Lepto. So, with that part of it, going into some of the cause and progression of Lepto. So it is a bacterial infection. It can spread rapidly and lead to kidney damage, liver failure, respiratory issues, and or death if untreated. Generally, with early treatment, prognosis is good. Delayed treatment increases the risk of complications. Dogs that recover may still need long-term care from damaged organs. As Casimir mentioned, some of the early symptoms are fever, lethargic, decreased appetite. Those will progress into symptoms of higher fever, jaundice, muscle and joint pain, some reluctance of the dogs to move, definitely fatigue and depression, vomiting, diarrhea, and then some severe infection signs are bloody vomit and feces, coughing, difficulty breathing, excessive thirst, and urination or no urination at all, rapid dehydration. So how is this disease spread? It's spread through contaminated water, soil, and urine from infected animals such as feral hogs, raccoons, skunks, things like that guard dogs are obviously in contact with all the time, and so are most of our livestock. Risk increases with exposure to wildlife, standing water, and unvaccinated animals. So, kind of moving on to the medical complications. Obviously, kidney and liver failure is a big issue with dogs, and you would most likely have to put them down. Some respiratory stress. Definitely check their gums, make sure they're red or at least pink. They'll have some extreme fatigue and might have some labored breathing. If you see any of those things, jaundice, anything like that, that's immediate veterinary emergency care is going to be needed. Again, the best way to prevent lepto is vaccination. Most annual dog shots are what they call a DHLPP, which is distemper. Oh gosh, I just forgot the H. The L is lepto, then it's parvo and parainfluenza. That's a real common dog shot that your dog should get, and puppies should also get a lepto vaccine. I know a lot of times folks that are closer to town may have a town vet that isn't familiar with lepto, and how easy it is for dogs to contract it. And so I would encourage you to make sure that your guard dog puppies are vaccinated early on. Environmental precautions, avoid any standing water and wildlife contaminated areas. Make sure you have some routine checkups and you're current on your dog's vaccinations. So the key takeaway from this thing is that lepto is definitely serious. It's a fast-moving bacterial infection that the dogs can get, because they're exposed to it from, like I said, feral hogs, raccoons, skunks, things like that. And, it definitely is life-threatening because it can cause organ failure. So, if you suspect this, get your dog to the vet right away, get them treated, follow whatever the vet recommends, and, try to prevent this from even happening with annual vaccinations. Okay. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to your vet. I am not a vet, and again, this was information from our local vet. Next question up is from Beverly Whiteside. She's a regular follower of the program as well. She has a young female Akbosh. She's going to be 2 years old in November. Her mentor is a 10-year-old Great Pyrenees. She wants to know how much time is acceptable for the young dog to take breaks from the herd during the day. To kind of set this up, she says her sheep pasture is next to her house. All winter and spring, the 2-year-old dog pretty much stayed with the flock and the other dog. Summer came, and she had an old Pyrenees that, due to poor health, had essentially stayed lying under a shade tree in the yard and kind of retired, and so he passed away last week. She said the young dog began staying under the shade in the yard during the heat of the day, sleeping as well, but always returned to the flock in the evening. The Pyrenees never leaves the herd, she says, and now that the older male has died, the Akbosh is spending more time with the herd, but still takes breaks to lie in the cool area of the yard. However, in the warm weather, she rotates her sheep to another pasture that's about 300 yards from the house. She says the young Akbosh will go with the herd and the other dogs in the mornings and stay most of the day until about 3 o'clock. Then you can find her lying underneath the shade tree. Once again, when early evening comes, she's back with the sheep. So Beverly's concern is that it's her time away from the herd, especially when she's in the pasture further from the house. She says also she definitely doesn't seem to love her sheep like the Pyrenees does. Her Pyrenees kind of coexist with the sheep, and they love her, and vice versa. The Akbosh tends to walk through the herd, shoving the sheep that don't move out of her way. Doesn't hurt them or bite them anyway, but acts more like an authoritarian or a bully. She said the sheep start moving away from her the minute they see her coming. Also, I have border collies I use to take the sheep to different pastures. She thinks she has to be in the front, leading the sheep all the way. Is this bossy personality seen more in the Akbosh breed than the Pyrenees, or is it just her dog? And she also wants to know, are LGDs allowed to take breaks from the herd? Will this get better with age? And she may be improving now since she's older, since the older male died last week, but she still leaves the herd. And she wants to know, is a bossy LGD okay? Well, again, thanks for reaching out, Beverly. First, I'm sorry to hear about your older dog passing away. I know it's real tough to lose the good ones, and it happens to all of us. So, most Akbosh that we have and that we've had in our bonding project are generally floaters, which means they're with the herd sometimes, and they might be out on the perimeter other times, or they might just out be, kind of patrolling the area in between. So, I don't think that's too big of an issue, and so yours appears to be doing that same type of thing. Even though she might be up at the house, I think she's also, kind of figured out that, hey, that Pyrenees, is there all the time, doing the job, and so she thinks it's okay to leave and, go hang out under the tree where probably her old friend was, the male dog as well. One thing that I can say is, the dogs can definitely go through depression when they lose another mature dog or a sibling or something like that. We had a case like that a couple years ago with one of our dogs. It was Doc and Thelma. Doc got hit on the road. Thelma was there, saw it all happen, and she hightailed it back to her pasture. She was definitely depressed for several weeks. We had to go out and hand feed her. She wouldn't eat. She lost some weight, and eventually she kind of got over that. But that could also be part of the reason why that dog is going to that specific area, in the yard and laying under the tree. Besides that, it's been hot. She could be mourning the loss of that older male dog as well. As far as the bossiness goes, I don't think it's a breed-specific thing. A lot of times the dogs will generally lead livestock to a new area or lead them up to the corrals or something like that. It's usually that the livestock are following the dog because they know that, the dog means safety for them. And so they follow, the dog wherever it goes. So I don't think there's anything wrong with your guard dog being a little bit bossy. In general, I think it's fine for them to also protect their food and their feeding station from livestock. As long as they don't go after the livestock and make any contact as far as biting or, catching them by the tail or leg or something like that, I think that's okay. The dog should be able to eat and, have an area that they can do that away from everybody else. So hopefully that answers your question, Beverly. I think your dog is maturing, and I think she's going to be okay for you. But if you have any other questions, feel free to, send me some Facebook messages or drop me an email. The next question we have up is from Nicole Kondrake. Hopefully I pronounced that right, Nicole. Sorry if I didn't. She says they have a 7-month-old Great Pyrenees that never tests the fence, even though a 2-year-old female with him never stops testing the fence. He only barks when necessary, never chases the calves, the cows, or the sheep. He's a dream dog. She says, I'm eager for him to make puppies with hopefully a similar temperament. She's read online that it's not recommended to breed a male Great Pyrenees until a year or 18 months. What's my opinion? I absolutely want to breed him as soon as possible without hurting him, obviously. So, Nicole, thanks for reaching out. This is definitely a question we haven't had in the past, and so I always welcome new questions like this. I would suggest waiting until the dog is 18 months old. One, to make sure that, this great behavior continues, because a lot of times, your pup is just going to be starting to go into adolescence, any time now. And so those puppies that were great from the time that you got them, as a weaned pup until 8 months old or so, can then become little demons. I saw a picture of the life cycle of a Great Pyrenees the other day on Facebook, and it showed this cute little puppy from, birth to about 8 months old, and then it showed a T-Rex from 8 to about 18 months, and then, this big loving dog again. And that's definitely a true situation for those of you that have had enough guard dogs. And so, I would encourage you to wait just to make sure that pup fully develops. The other thing, that could be an issue, is definitely having enough viable sperm in the semen to impregnate the female. I've had it happen with 2 different male dogs here at home who were over 12 months but not quite 18 months of age. They definitely were stuck with a female, and the pregnancy didn't take. Now, could it have been the female? Yes, it could have each time. I don't think so. But, those males were probably just a little young. And so with one of them, I'm going to give him another chance now that he's going to be about 2.5 coming up here. I think a lot of times it's not necessarily so much the male dogs that it's an issue with breeding early. It's more the females. And the big reason on that is because, they need to mature more, both mentally and physically, structurally. And so, if you breed them too early, that can cause a lot of issues with growth in that female, and it can stunt her growth, and it can cause long-term development issues from her, because those puppies are going to be pulling a lot of vitamins and minerals, especially calcium, from that female as she is maturing, and then also at the same time, growing puppies inside of her. And so that can be a lot for a young dog that isn't fully mature yet. So thanks again for that great question, Nicole. Hopefully that answered everything. If you have anything else and you're online with us today, feel free to post those in the comments. And those folks that are on there, I'll say hello to, and I'll try to get to your questions here once I get done. The next question that we have up here, and it's good to see that you're logged on. I think it's Osiris Raw Light. Hopefully I got that right, or at least close for you. They have a livestock guardian dog from my backyard homestead. The pup's about 6 weeks old. They've allocated 10 spots in our flock plan to accommodate 20 to 30 birds and some rabbits. When should he start living with them full time? And then also, how do I feel about feeding them a raw diet? They're considering, when he gets older, feeding him whole rabbit, including organ meat, some kibble, and some micronutrients from seafood. So thanks for logging on today, and again for reaching out with this question. That's another good question that I don't think that I've had in a while. So at this point, I would say you got the pup a little bit young. I personally prefer not to get them until they're at least 8 weeks, and that's mainly so that they're fully weaned and they've picked up some of those extra canine social skills that come along with being with the other pups and being with their mother longer. But since you've got him, I would encourage you to get him in with livestock immediately, especially with poultry. Poultry, and I've said this many times on our Q&As, they're probably the hardest thing to bond livestock guardian dogs to. And I'm not even sure if they actually bond to poultry or if they just kind of grow to accept them in their, general protecting area. So, I would place the pup inside some sort of an enclosure that's within your poultry area. That's big enough for him to move around and things like that, but not be able to directly get to the birds, because he is still definitely a puppy. They've got lots of puppy energy, and you don't want him injuring any birds early on. And so the other thing that I would suggest, and this is something that I've mentioned several times on here, is every time that you go out to collect eggs, for instance, you go to feed, you're going to do any cleaning, you're going to move birds around, that puppy should come out of the enclosure on a leash, excuse me, and have them tethered to you so that you can do what you need to, but the puppy's right there with you, and definitely being well supervised. Over time, as the puppy continues to grow, just have them untethered from you, but with the leash dragging. That way, in case they take off and start to chase a bird, for instance, you can, step on the leash or grab the leash and pull them back and discipline them. Especially with poultry, and actually I haven't gotten any questions about rabbits, so I'm not sure, but I would probably say with the rabbits as well, since they're small. You can't really trust a guard dog on their own, unsupervised, until they're at least 2 years old. So just kind of know that going into this process. The other thing that I would highly recommend is, lots of time outside that enclosure, on a leash, teaching them some basic commands, leash training, tether training, giving them a truck ride or a vehicle ride once a week. it helps burn off a lot of that puppy energy. And so that way, when they are released from the pen with the livestock, they're not chasing the birds and the rabbits all over the place. How long should that kind of stuff be? 15 to 20 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week, and kind of incorporate all those different things into that, along with some direct socialization. You didn't say if you had like a long-haired dog or not, but if you do, definitely incorporate some grooming into that as well to get that hair trained so that it's easier to do that grooming and remove some of that long dead hair when they get to be an adult. The other thing that I would suggest, and again, keep your training short. It's better to have short, multiple trainings throughout the day than, sitting down with the dog for an hour. Because just like kids, they have a short attention span, and, you're going to lose them after 15 minutes or so of training. Set the dog up, with you and somebody else that can be like a helper, one of your kids or, husband or wife, and, have the dog on a leash. Sit down in a chair and have somebody bring over one of the birds that's really calm. Same thing with one of the rabbits that are really calm. Let the puppy sniff it, smell it, put the animals down, let them walk around by the puppy, and just let them interact, but very supervised, where, if anything happens, you can pull the dog back, somebody else can grab the chicken or the rabbit, something like that. Again, that training should take, 10 to 15 minutes, several times a week. And as the training progresses, the puppy can be off the leash or off the tether. And, you bring in the birds or bring in a rabbit or something like that. Supervise, let them interact really well with each other. And just always try to end on a positive note. Even if it's been a bad day and, the puppy, tore off a wing off a chicken or, killed a chicken or something while you're training, try to end on a positive note, even if it's just, you tell the dog to sit and the dog sits, give them a treat of some sort and then put them back in their enclosure and start the training over. If you do have some setbacks like that, don't continue to move to the next step of, the puppy being with the animals longer. You need to, go back a step and maybe put them back onto a tether or back onto a leash or having somebody else there helping you, things like that. It definitely is going to take you a lot longer to, train your guard dog with poultry and rabbits than it's going to be, and it's going to be a different process than it would be with sheep or goats, for instance. Just like bonding dogs to cattle, it is different than the other two as well. So hopefully that answers your question. I see you've got a follow-up thing. So correction tips. For me, guard dogs are fairly smart, and so if you scold them well 2 or 3 times, I've found that they usually don't repeat whatever that bad behavior is. So if it's chasing chickens, for instance, you catch them, you've got a little riding crop with you, hopefully, and swat them good on the butt a couple times, yell at them, tell them no, and that kind of thing usually works. If you don't correct that behavior when they're young and you can easily just swat them on the butt, then you have to get into things like using e-collars, which I don't like to do because I'd rather swat a dog on the butt with a newspaper or a riding crop or something than have to shock the heck out of them. I don't think that's beneficial. So those are some things that I would do. If as they get older and they're with animals more and they start chasing something, for instance, then you can get into having like an air horn or one of those little 22 short revolvers that they use for like bird dogs with some blanks in it to make some noise if they're out there at distance and not listening to your yelling or something like that. But stop those bad behaviors early on, and it makes adolescent and adult training much easier because the dog knows where the boundaries are. And, when you yell at them no, they're going to stop whatever that bad behavior is instead of continuing it. So hopefully that helps you out. So on the training part, getting to your other question about the feeding, and I get this question a lot, and I don't think there's anything wrong with a raw supplementary diet. You have to remember that guard dogs are domesticated canines. They are not wild canines. They do not need to eat raw meat on a constant basis. Their body systems have adapted over time to being domesticated, that they need to actually be able to digest some grains and have carbohydrates in their diets for them to be healthy. And so I know everybody's always on the issue of, oh, I don't want corn or wheat or barley or whatever it is in my dog's food. It should just be all, meat or meat byproduct or something. That's actually not true. Like I said, they do need to have some grains in their diet because they need those carbohydrates, because we've modified their digestive system over thousands of years. Along with that, I would say feed a high quality food. Don't go down to Walmart and buy a bunch of Old Roy. You definitely get what you pay for, in any type of feed. And so, if you're looking for a feed to look at, I would look at something like Diamond or Victor. I don't think you need to feed, $100 bags of Purina Pro Plan. But, a good quality, middle of the road feed, something that's got somewhere around 22% protein and about 18% fat. I think either one of those dog foods you can find a kibble that's like that. And then supplement them, with meat and organ meat and things like that. I just would make sure that, I wouldn't give them any bones that they can break up and swallow, because that can lead to punctured stomachs. It can lead to bones stuck in their mouth, in their throat. And those bone fragments sometimes can get fairly small, and they can actually puncture the lining of the intestines or the stomach and migrate into other organs. So that would be my recommendation. If you definitely want to, give your dog some bones to chew on, for example, go down to the local butcher and get some cow leg bones or knuckle bones from them. They love them. They're good frozen for the dogs. It's a nice, cool treat in the summertime, and they can't break those and swallow them. So hopefully that helps you out on the feeding tips as well. Next question up is from Manuel Zenquist. He wanted to know my thoughts on keeping 2 LGDs, male and female, for homestead on 3 acres in western Massachusetts. He says he only has 10 chickens, 6 ducks, and 4 Nigerian goats. And he says when he gets a dog, he would like it to have a companion for protection and socialization. So, Manuel, thanks for reaching out. I'm glad to see that we have followers all the way up in Massachusetts. In this, situation, while I am a guard dog specialist and I try to help people out as much as possible, I don't actually recommend, you getting 2 guard dogs for such a small place. Likely what's going to happen is one of them is going to get bored and, they're going to end up roaming off, or they're going to cause other types of problems, over resource guarding or just aggression with the other dog. Honestly, I think you would be money ahead in the long run by installing some good quality fencing, some like 4x4 mesh or some 4x2 mesh, putting some predator wire at the bottom of it, and if you've got the money, maybe even adding some skirting, adding in a strand or 2 of electric fence at the bottom and at the top, I think would be helpful as well. Livestock guarding dogs are not always the best solution for small producers, especially something that small with that many animals. Dog food is extremely expensive. As I mentioned, it takes at least 2 years for the dogs to fully mature and to be able to do the job that you need them to do. Now if you're going to plan on increasing your numbers, you're going to get some cattle and maybe some sheep and some more goats. Then you may need a guardian dog, especially if you're going to kind of have them, penned up across the 3 acres in different areas. You're going to rotate them through, kind of following each other or something like that. But, for a place this small, Manuel, I would actually probably recommend getting a llama. They're going to eat the same feed that your livestock are going to. If your property's open, they'll do a great job of guarding for you. So that would be my recommendation. This time, I would recommend probably not getting a guard dog in this particular situation. My next question up is a very similar one. It's from Teresa Langford. Thanks for reaching out, Teresa. And she says that they're surrounded by coyotes, but they've had no losses until this year, and then they've lost 3 or 4 animals. They are actively hunting them, and they bought a llama that I hope will guard her rams and weaned ram lambs in a 2-acre partially wooded plot that is fenced with electric netting and electric wire. She says it's too early to tell if the llama will guard well. He was a recent acquisition. I'm considering adding a pair of livestock guardian dogs to this area also. Is this a good plan? After they've been acclimated to each other, will the llama and the dogs be able to coexist with each other? So, again, as I mentioned with manual, while I, love guard dogs and they're a great tool, in a 2-acre area, again, two guard dogs and a llama on top of it, with electric netting, I really think you're wasting your money, and I don't think it's going to be helpful to have that many different guardian animals in one location. The other thing is that you've got electric netting. Buy some more of that. It's an excellent product. I have yet to have a coyote get into any pasture that I have personally with electric netting. And trust me, I've got as many coyotes around my place as anybody does. I basically have 4 different packs, one at each corner of the property. So, unless you're going to get into, again, like I kind of mentioned with manual, you're going to have multiple species and they're going to kind of be broken up and you're going to be rotating them through that 2-acre area. I really don't think you need a guard dog, especially not 2. I would stick with the llama, give the llama some time to work, and kind of see how things go and reevaluate your fencing fund again. If you can put in some permanent fencing, good net wire like 4x4 or 4x2 stuff, and run that an electric wire, hot wire around the base and one at the top, that's going to keep out probably the majority of your predators. Unless you get into something like a mountain lion or maybe a bobcat that can clear the fence. Getting to your second part of your question, Teresa, about the llamas and the guard dogs getting along if you decide to go this route. Llamas work because they're aggressive towards canines, and so are donkeys, and that's why they work. And so, if you've got a well-fenced area, that even if it's wooded, as long as it's fairly open where they can see well, they'll do a great job for you. And as long as you don't get more than one llama or more than one donkey, because then they end up forming a herd of their own and they leave your animals unprotected. So because your llamas or donkeys are canine aggressive, they're probably not going to get along with your guard dogs. And so, you're going to kind of be doubling up on guardian animals when you really don't need to, Teresa. So, the other thing too is, unless that llama or that donkey grows up with guard dogs around, there could be issues with, that llama protecting your livestock from your own guard dogs. Okay, and so that could just create more problems than you really need to have. So, give that llama some time to adjust and then kind of reevaluate it. You didn't say where you are. If you are here in Texas and the llama doesn't work out and you want to pursue the llama, I know of an excellent person that kind of does some training and vetting of llamas to make sure that they're a good guardian llama. And so feel free to reach out to me if that doesn't work out. One more thing on like the electric fencing, and this is just kind of for everybody that's out there. Make sure that you have a good ground. I can't stress having a good ground. You need at least 3 8-foot ground rods, hopefully like copper ones, spaced about 10 feet apart. Connect them in series, and get a good strong fence charger. I know nothing is in volts anymore. Heaven forbid, I don't know why. They do everything in joules, and so I would say don't get a charger that's less than 1 joule. I don't care how small of a piece of property you have. These things that are like 1/4 of a joule or half a joule or whatever, yeah, they work great on poly wire for horses. Okay, they're not designed to keep predators out. And so get some good galvanized 14 gauge or better steel wire. You can pick up a roll of it from Tractor Supply fairly inexpensively. Get a charger that's at least 1 joule, and it's going to be putting out at least 8,000 volts. Okay, that will keep your guard dogs in and everything else out. Okay, so that's my recommendation, again, on hot wire. I've got a few questions, it looks like, and I think we might as well go and answer these today, since it seems like so many folks are on here. And so this one's from Edwin Chavez. He says he loves our YouTube videos. Thank you, Edwin, for that. He's adopted a 160-pound, 4-year-old male Anatolian Pyrenees mix that has livestock guardian dog experience. The dog's outside 24/7, working dog. That's great to hear. Unfortunately, he is jumping our 5-foot fences. I'm unable to run a hot wire on this property, and his coat is extremely thick, and the collar makes no difference. So he said, 1, would you recommend a chain drag or a dangle stick in this situation? 2, do I have to catch him in the act of jumping the fence and then implement one of those methods? I want to be sure he understands that this is happening due to him jumping the fence. And then 3, am I understanding correctly that I should leave the device on for 30 days, 24/7? And then 4, would neutering him help this situation? So that's a bunch of questions, Edwin, and I'll try to make sure I get to all these. If I skip one, feel free to put it in the chat again for me. So, a dangle stick really isn't going to help in this situation. A dangle stick is more for chasing of livestock with an adolescent dog. A chain drag can help, especially if it's got like a small car tire on it, because it'll allow the dog to still jump the fence. But they're not going to pull the chain and the tire over. They're going to be stuck wherever they jumped out at. And so, yes, they still jump the fence, but that's not really the fun thing for them. The fun thing is for them to go roaming across the countryside. And so, eventually they'll get tired of not being able to do that, and, they stop jumping the fence. So, kind of getting down to your next question, you don't have to catch him in the act to doing that. It does help if you can catch him in the act and scold him for doing that. But you can put the tire drag on him, and that's what I would definitely recommend for a dog this big. And, because I think you said, wow, man, yeah, he's 160 pounds. You'll definitely need a car tire, maybe even a small truck tire to slow him down. There's other things like logs and sections of plastic chemical barrels that people will use, but since you have a 4-year-old dog and he's 160 pounds, I would definitely go with the tire on the drag for this instance. It's gonna collect some dirt over time, and it's gonna get even harder for him to drag it around and make that jumping, especially if the tire's out there a little bit. Let's see here. And yes, you are correct. Generally what we do with training aids like a dangle stick or a yoke or a drag of some sort is we leave them on the dog 24/7 for 30 days. And then we take them off, we monitor behavior, and if that behavior has changed, then, life is good with you and the dog, and they should be guarding livestock again. If it hasn't changed, as soon as you see that they've gotten out or they've started chasing animals again, or whatever the situation is for a specific training aid, it needs to go right back on, and it needs to stay on for another 30 days. We've never had to leave any training aid on a dog more than 90 days, so kind of going through it 3 times. However, I have talked to some producers who have left a drag on a dog that's trying to roam or something like that for up to 6 months. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, as long as the dog can get around and move and, sleep well, eat, drink water, that type of thing. But they really aren't designed to be on the dog, permanently. My recommendation, after 90 days, if they're still getting out and like this method hasn't worked and you can't put the hot wire up, I would definitely, look into getting some sort of virtual fence collar. The 2 that I would recommend is one, Spot On Fence, who sponsors this program for y'all, or Invisible Fence brand. Both of those collars we've been testing at the center now for several years. They both work very well. They have longer battery life, and they're more accurate than anybody else that's out there on the market. I think Spot On's the most accurate one that's out there and that's my personal favorite, even though it's a little bit more expensive than some of the other ones. Your last question, Edwin, would neutering him help the situation? Yes, it probably will. If he smells some female in heat, that's probably why he's leaving. And at some point, there's probably going to be puppies someplace that you may or may not end up knowing about. So, I would definitely get him fixed. I don't think any guard dog should be left intact unless you're definitely breeding them, and you kind of know a little bit about breeding livestock guardian dogs. So I would get him fixed as soon as you can. Just remember, though, even if you got him fixed today, it takes some time for those hormones to level out, and so it's going to be at least 30 or 60 days, before you're going to see a real effect from that neutering, kind of take place. So the sooner that you can get it done, Edwin, the better. Oh, howdy, Nicole. I didn't realize you were from Pennsylvania, so thank you for logging on today. Let's see. Looks like we've got a question from Susan. Have we used GPS collars where you can set up virtual fences at all, such as a halo collar? We have a very good livestock fence, but our dog constantly has been digging under or going over the fence and roaming around the neighbors' houses, etc. We used a dangle stick and that did not work. This is a 10-month-old Crockett-Chan female. She just went into her first heat. Okay. Well, Susan, since she's already in heat, hopefully, you can keep her contained and she doesn't end up getting bred by, like, the next door neighbor's pit bull or, Rottweiler, or heaven forbid a Chihuahua or something like that. Oh, believe me, that can definitely happen with a guard dog, even though the Chihuahua is small. Yes, we have used those collars as I just mentioned earlier. Again, I really like the Spot On Fence collar, not just because they sponsor this program, but basically because it's a 3-in-1 collar, and you don't have to pay for the subscription like you do with Invisible Fence for theirs to work. If you just want a virtual fence collar, you can buy the Spot On collar, and that's what it'll do. If you want the tracking, then you can pay for the subscription, and it'll do that. And then it also has an e-collar feature. So, if you're having an adolescent guard dog that might be chasing livestock, for instance, if you've got the Spot On collar on them from your phone, as long as it's got cellular connectivity, you can, tone the dog, vibrate the dog, or, shock the dog if that dog's out a distance and can't hear you. So those are the reasons why I like the Spot On Fence collar so much. Also, they've got 3 different size collars versus just one with Invisible Fence. So if you've got a puppy or you've got a really big dog like Edwin had, that monster, you can get different size collars that will fit. It's not just kind of a one size fits all type of thing with Invisible Fence. The other thing that I really like about Spot On Fence is they have an exclusion zone. So for instance, my personal place, our house and barn sits in the middle of the property. So I have an exclusion zone set around the house and the barn area, and all the corrals and stuff, so the guard dogs can't come up here at all. But they still can't escape from the property because they also have the fence on the boundaries. Invisible Fence, for instance, doesn't have that. Another thing I like about Spot On is, especially if you're using the collar like in bonding pens or some small training pastures, their collar will go down to a ½ acre in size, where Invisible Fence, is only 3/4 of an acre. Now, I haven't tested Halo, I haven't tested, the Pawtronics, and I don't know, there's another Phi collar or something like that, or the Tractive. We haven't tested any of those, mainly because those companies haven't approached us, or haven't been willing to send us some free collars to test out. I can tell you that I will be doing a virtual fence collar project, hopefully coming this next spring. I've got a little bit of extra money in a one-time grant, and so I'm going to be purchasing some collars or trying to get them donated from some of those other companies, and hopefully we'll have some project results for you. But hopefully that kind of answers your question, Susan. The other thing I would say is all of our virtual fence collars, everything's set to high. I don't mess around. I don't have time to play with the guard dog all day long, to keep it on the property. I want them to know that, they're going to hear this loud sound, their collar's going to shake, and, if they still ignore that, it's going to shock them good. So I don't play around on partial settings. And our dogs don't leave our pastures either, both at home and at the center. So that would be my recommendation. You're very welcome, Edwin. They'll try a bigger tire. Yeah, you got a big dog, Edwin. My goodness. Edwin's got another quick question. He says here, we're hoping to breed this 160-pound male with our female. She's 85 pounds. Would doing so be dangerous to the female or the pups at birth? Probably not. I mean, your female is a little bit on the smaller side, but a lot of your guard dog breeds, especially like Maremas, they're definitely on the smaller side, and usually that 80-pound range to 90 for a female. So your male's pretty big, but I think you should be okay. You shouldn't have any issues with those pups. So. Let's see here. Looks like we got one more question. Would you recommend fencing for Pyrenees, and why? And this is from Christina Durance from Georgia. Well, thank you for following us all the way from Georgia. I sure appreciate that. Yes, definitely for Pyrenees. Pyrenees are roamers. They are perimeter dogs, and they do like to have larger territories than most of your other livestock guardian dog breeds. Now, can you stop that? Yes, you definitely can. If you get a Pyrenees, for instance, or an Anatolian Shepherd as a weaned pup, and you bond them in a pen with hot wire, and then you follow that up after they leave the bonding pen at 6 months, and they go into a training pasture with a virtual fence collar. We've had dogs that are, definitely prone to roaming. We had 3 pups a while back that were Pyrenees Anatolian Shepherd crosses. So you have the worst of 2 roamers in one dog. And those were some of the best dogs that we had go through the program, because they got that hot wire training in the bonding pen, and then they got virtual fence training in the pasture. And those dogs actually never left their ranches, their producer ranches, during the time that we were tracking them, which was from 10 months until 18 months old. And I've heard from those producers since then, and those dogs still don't leave their pasture. So I would encourage you to have actual fencing for any breed of livestock guardian dog. They need some sort of permanent fence. A virtual fence by itself will likely not keep them contained. So yes, get some good 4x4 fencing. If you can run a hot wire inside of it, especially if you're a smaller producer, that's even better. And one at the top, that'll keep coyotes from jumping, it'll keep your guard dogs from jumping out, and it'll keep them from digging as well. So that would be my recommendation to you, Christina. And we had somebody from Alabama. Boy, I don't know if we had anybody from Texas other than Casimir K today. Well, thank you folks for logging on and watching. I know this Q&A went a little bit long. Boy, I think this was actually our longest one ever. So I appreciate everybody following our channel. The question did come up, and I just want to let everybody know that is watching today real quick. We do use all this information. So any of you that are, getting questions answered, if you aren't following our page, I would strongly encourage you to do that. We did lose our regular funding from the Sheep and Goat Predator Board here that funded this program for the last 6 years. And so we are actively looking for grant funding to continue this program for you, the producers. So we use the number of followers on our Facebook page. We also have an Instagram account and our YouTube channel as well, to show the reach that this program has to producers all over the U.S. And actually internationally. So if you aren't following, please follow all of our social media pages. And if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, I would encourage you to do that as well. I think we have over 100 videos on there now, all these Q&As as well. Because we do use the amount of time that videos are watched, to show that, people are actually getting something out of the information that we're putting out. So all that kind of stuff is very helpful for finding grants and actually securing that funding to keep this project going for you. So with that, we're going to go ahead and kind of wrap up. I will say thank you to Shannon, watching all the way out in California as well. Again, I do want to thank our sponsors of the Q&A session, Lone Star Tracking and Spot On Fence. They both help make this Q&A session possible for you. If you're looking for any type of GPS tracker, I would strongly recommend the Oyster tracker, the cellular version of that or the LoRa version of it. Both of those are great units. We've gone from the Oyster 1 all the way to the Oyster 3 version, and we'll probably keep going for the next version that comes out as well. Also, as I mentioned, Spot On Fence, it's a great virtual fence caller. You won't go wrong, with purchasing one of those and supporting them either. And they are made here in the U.S., as a matter of fact, also. Our next Q&A session will take place on Thursday, November 6th at 3 p.m. Do want to let everybody know we are having our kind of late fall, early winter webinar. Dr. Catherine Lord, who's done some webinars for us in the past, will be doing our next webinar on the 20th of November at 3 o'clock. Should be a good one. She's going to be talking about some canine aggression and things that she's been doing with Darwin's Ark, which is a working dog DNA collection project. So go ahead and check those out. Last, I want to make one last shout out to the Texas Guard Dog Association. It is open to producers and breeders all over the U.S. If you're looking for a guard dog, I would encourage you to go to the Texas Guard Dog Association. It is a group of reputable breeders to get a guard dog from. They are also having their fall field day in Waco at the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame on October the 25th, which is a Saturday, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'll be giving us a workshop along with Dr. Tomachek, our wildlife specialist, who does a lot of stuff with guard dogs, and Noble Research will be doing one, and there'll be some vendors and things like that on site as well. So if you're interested in that field day, you can go to the Texas Guard Dog Association's website, and you can register for that there as well. So thanks again, folks. I sure appreciate all the great questions that we had today and all the feedback in the comments. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.